Everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So this is the continuation of my previous video on traffic light system. If you have not watched that video, then you can go and check that out first, and then you can continue from here. So in this video we are going to make some changes in our code, and also uh, we are going to make some modification in this UI by attaching a timer to this traffic light system. So the idea is to take the duration of this uh, current light from this traffic rules object and reflect the timer here in the UI running in reverse until it reaches 0. So if there is transition of colors or lights from one color to another, then the duration should also switch accordingly with respect to this transition. So before we go on to make this implementation, and also we are going to make some changes in our code in the line that we must follow some good coding practices. So let us go to the implementation, but before going to the implementation part, let me discuss the crux of today's video, which is the concept of useEffect hook. So in our previous video as well, we have discussed, or we have used the useEffect hook concept to implement this UI, and in today's video it is of great significance to discuss the concept of useEffect hook in detail. So let's discuss that. So if you go to the official documentation of React, you can see the definition of useEffect as a React hook which lets you synchronize your component to an external system. So if you talk in simpler terminologies, you can say React hook is, or React useEffect hook is something which lets you perform some kind of side effects in your component. So these side effects could be simply fetching data from an API endpoint, or it could be performing an asynchronous task in the UI, or it could be subscribing or unsubscribing to an event. So we can perform all these things using useEffect hook. So useEffect hook, if we talk by syntax, then it takes a callback function, along with it a dependency array which is optional, and it takes certain values on which the execution of the callback function depends. Okay, so we can also draw some equivalence to the lifecycle methods of class-based components and try to understand the concept of useEffect hook in detail, because this dependency array is dependent on certain factors, and those factors, like those variation, could be very much equivalent to certain lifecycle methods of the class-based component. So if we talk about class-based component, so prior to React version of 16.8, class-based component was the norm, and if we can recall, then in class-based component there are different lifecycle methods which runs in the background to execute the class-based component. So we can categorize the lifecycle methods in different phases. So when we try to load our component in the UI, there is the mounting phase, in which initially a constructor is evoked where we initialize all the values of states and props, and then we render the content in the HTML in the form of HTML, or we render the static content in our UI. Then we update the DOM accordingly, and finally this component did mount methods get evoked. This is the method where side effects like data fetching or some asynchronous task or subscribing and unsubscribing to events happen. And as you can recall, when we try to get data from or fetch data from an external API or server, we already have the static UI loaded in our web page, and then when the dynamic data comes from the server, we load it afterward only. So this component did mount method could be very much equivalent to this useEffect code, where we take a callback function as a parameter with a empty dependency array. So it does not depend on any dependencies or any value to get executed. So similar to this mounting phase, we have the updating phase, which which follows the similar code syntax for use effect, but here it depends on certain dependencies or factors. So in this updating phase, the states or props value gets updated, and finally we evoke the component did update method. Okay, and if we try to draw an equivalence to a use effect syntax, then this is very much appropriate, as it takes a callback function along with a dependency array where there are certain values on which the execution of this function depends. Okay, now coming on to the last phase, which is unmounting phase, and which is of great importance to us, because through this unmounting concept we can understand why it is really necessary to delete the previous context of the component before we unmount a component. So let's take an example. Suppose we have created a UI where a timer is running. So when we mount that component in the UI, we also push the execution context to the call stack with the timer ID. So if we unmount it, the timer ID or the execution context still there, because React follows a single page architecture, and these methods do not get deleted by itself. So it is really necessary to clear this execution context, because it can so if even if the component has been unmounted, the timer is still there in the call stack or in the JavaScript engine, and if it stays there for longer period of time, then it can create memory leaks or bugs. So if we try to unmount the same component again, if we try to mount the same component again in the UI, then we can see another timer being pushed into the call stack. So we can see a variation in the rendering of the content, as it is having two timer at a time, and if we do this for the third time, then we can have 3x the time, as the timer is running in a 3x speed, because that component has all its previous execution context still there in the call stack. So through this component will unmount method, we clear those execution contexts before we unmount the component. So if we try to draw the equivalence to the use effect hooks syntax, then we can this could be very much appropriate, as it takes a callback function and a dependency array which could be filled or empty as well. But this is really important, as it clears the execution context of the previously running functions, which is really important. So in case of our code here, we have used the set timeout variable here, but we have not cleared the execution context of this set timeout function. So if we try to unmount it, then the execution context of this set timeout function will still be there. So let's make some changes to this code and try to implement what we are desiring to implement. Now coming to the implementation part of the modification, we already have this pre-existing UI with us, and we are going to attach a timer container with this, where it will visually show the timer running in reverse, and when it reaches 0, then it should re-updates the value according to the current light, as the transition is also happening with the color. So let us create a div for this. inside this traffic wrapper container. So I have already specified the style for this container. So the moment here it is, so I did not want to spend too much time writing CSS code. So let's create a div. The moment I create this div, so a container will pop us before us, and it will have all the specified CSS properties already, so we do not have to do anything with that. And let's create this. So div of timer, you can see we have the timer container with us. Now let us create a use state variable which will track down the value for those timer running in reverse. So let's say const of timer, set timer will be the setter function. That's, it will be coming from use state, obviously. Let's provide it the value of 0 initially, and also wrap it here inside the div. Okay, now we can see the value inside this container. Now we are going to create one more effect where, as the transition is happening from one color to another, the color respective to this transition should also reflect with the font color of this container. So let's add a property of style. Okay, and inside this we will give it a dynamic value. So the color property will have a dynamic value where it will come from this traffic rules object, and whatever the current light is uh, it will be having, it would access the color property from that current light. So let's give it this value of traffic rules current light dot color. Now you can see the transition happening with this font as well. As the transition or the switch in lights is happening, it is also reflecting in this timer container as well. Okay, now let us create a set time interval inside this useEffect hook, which will be responsible for constant or continuous decrementation of this value. So let us create a set interval, and it will have the delay of 1000 millisecond, and in this we will set the timer to timer -1. If we do that, then after every update, it will, when we try to run it after this much of delay, then it will not update the value after every delay, but it will just take the value when this set time interval was created. So if we provide it with the value 0, then it will increment -1 to it only, and after this update of current light, so it will again give us -1. So there will be some irregularities in the code. So for that we have to pass a callback function inside it, where we will give it an argument of previous time. So it will give us the updated value after every decrement. Okay, let's check it out. Yeah, it is showing us the result, but it is decrementing in an unusual manner. So let us fix this first. As you can recall, in the earlier part of our video, we have discussed the concept of unmounting and clearing the execution context of our previous functions. So now is the time to implement that. So we must return something, a function which will clear out the execution, all the previous execution context. So this set timeout and set interval function returns an id. So if we store the function in a variable, so it will act as the id of that function. So let's name it timeout id and interval id. Now we can use these two variables to clear the execution context of these functions. So clear interval id. Okay, I have not, and here we will be doing clear timeout id. Okay, now there is no irregularities in the decrement of the values, but we are starting with the initial value of 0, so we must provide it with the initial value which is mentioned here in the specific duration of each light. So if the current light is somewhere here in the green, then it should give us the value according to that. So let's say traffic rules of current light dot duration. Let's see what it is showing. Okay, it is showing us the duration in milliseconds, so let us divide it with 1000. Yeah, now it's get converted to second, and now it's decrementing. But whenever this current light is getting updated, this whole component gets reloaded, and we are not setting the value of timer with respect to that. So let's set the value of timer at the top of the use effect, so that it gets the updated value every time it gets re-rendered. It will be same as this. Now you can see it is working fine with the transition here in the light, and with respect to this, the duration is running in reverse, and with showing the color with respect to the transition of the colors here in this traffic light. So let us now give it a value, a greater value. Let's say 14,000, here let's say 5,000, and let's say here 13,000. So you can see it is providing us a better visualization of the traffic. Let us give the red light as 13,000. Let's increase it to one more. No, it will be the traffic for Bangalore, so let's not play with that. Now everything is working fine, but we have wrote some redundant code inside this container. We are creating basically three divs inside this container to show these three specific circles. I think we should get rid of all these three divs and create only one div by using this traffic rules object, because it does not make much sense if we do not use the power of objects and higher order functions like maps. If we are returning JSX, it would be very much like writing raw HTML code. So let's optimize this and try to write much efficient and readable code. So let's delete all this, and after getting rid of all this, let's start with a curly brace. And there is a property, there is a function in for objects which through which we can get the keys of all the object we can get all the keys of this object. So let's first, let me write the code first, then I will explain you what I am going to do. So object dot keys of traffic light. So let me show you what it is going to give us. Console.log. Let me refresh it. Let's check out the console. Console is not loading. Traffic light is not defined. Okay, it should be traffic rules. Okay, we can see, yeah, we can see an array of three different values: green, yellow, and red. So basically it is giving us the key for this object, all the keys of this object in an array. So now we can, let us get rid of this console statement, and now let's map over this array. Let's give it the parameter as light. Now it will return a div, and I think I wrote it in the console. Let's get rid of this console. Let's minimize this console as well. Now let me try. Okay, let's give it the property dynamic. Let's give it dynamic class name values. So let's say class name will be dynamic in nature. So I have defined the style as this dot green neutral, red neutral, yellow neutral. Let's get rid of all, and let's say dot light only. Now we will give it the value of light. Now we can see three circles appearing, and also we have to show the transition of color. So let's say if we are in the current light and the current light is green, then it should have the class name as green. So let's say current light is equals to green, or light should be light as we are using this parameter for as an iterator. Then it should be called, the class name should be called light. Like for the red, it should be called as red, and for yellow the class name should be called as yellow, and so on. So if else, it should be nothing. Okay, now let's define the properties of here. Let's get rid of all of this and define it as dot red as background red dot yellow as background yellow and dot green as background green. I think we are done with our functionality, so it's showing us the color change transition and also reflecting everything that we are looking to implement. So yeah, this is all from this video. So if you have liked the video, then please give a thumbs up and subscribe for more such videos. Thank you.